Good morning. This is Associate Pastor Rob. This is the backyard of our house here on Wilmington Island. I wanted to share with you about the third word of the resurrection. We're using the workbook by Shane, and part of the story comes from Luke chapter 24, verse 13. Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only visitor in Jerusalem and do not know the things that have happened here these days?" "What things?" said Jesus. And in their conversation on their walk along the road, they told Jesus of the event of this person, Jesus of Nazareth, someone that they had hoped to be the Messiah. And it's their conversation, Jesus was able to come back with them and say, "This is what you need to understand about the scriptures." He even called them foolish for their misunderstanding. And he went on to fulfill what the scriptures really said about that. And then they were stopping for the evening, and they encouraged Jesus, the stranger, to come in with them. And he did. And it was in the breaking of the bread that their eyes were opened to who this stranger really was. Shane talks about the grief that these two believers must have had, because from their conversation, they were with the disciples. They had heard the women come back and tell about an empty tomb, but they didn't believe that. They were trying to get through just one day at a time. And in this day, they were so distraught. They were so overwhelmed with grief that they couldn't even recognize Jesus for being right there with them. Have you ever been overcome with grief? Have you ever faced a time where you were so distraught that you couldn't make right decisions? Things didn't make sense. And so it was for these two. Their whole world of faith had crashed around them. What were they to do? What were they to do? So for Shane, the third word here is, what are you so concerned about? These two had a concern that had weighed them down, and they were walking slowly back to their home. And it's Jesus that wants to take that weight and relieve it from our shoulders and place it on his shoulders. Shane shares about a young man named Jake he met in Louisiana. Shane served as associate at this church for a couple of years, and there he met Jake. Jake also was a hemophiliac. Jake also contracted HIV due to bad blood. And it was from that experience that Jake had a hard time with the church and a hard time with them rejecting him. But with Shane there, and Shane being able to understand his condition more than anyone else, he was able to bring him back in. And Jake was able to serve God in a wonderful way. But Shane shares that in his final days, because Jake did pass away, that he was able to keep a journal and shared some great insights. But the one thing that Shane said he wanted to share with us is that Jake wrote scriptures that were intended to help us in encouraging ways, that helps us with our burdens, that helps us when we are overwhelmed. So here are the verses that Jake wants to pass on to everybody. So I tried writing them down. You're welcome to play this back and look. So may we in God's scriptures see that God desires to ease our burdens and to help us with our grief. Have a great day.